People make this mistake that like, well, if I don't say it now, then it's as if I'm okay with it. Well, no, you can come back and say, come back the next day. When you said that, that's not acceptable to me. The
Yeah.
message gets across loud and clear. In fact, it is much clearer when the message is delivered like that than when you scream like a crazy person. And I think, what you're sort of alluding to here is the point that I bring out in the beginning of the book, which you saw, which is just, you don't have to deal with this right now. Right? Whatever is going on, it can be so frustrating. You're watching the other parent manage a situation and you don't like it. I have been there many times. The best thing to do is to shut up and wait until later. Short of
Oh,
something very dangerous. If someone's getting hit
right.
or there's violence or something, if there's an emergency, you will know there's an emergency. Right? But if
Yes.
it's not an emergency, that's not the time to deal with it. Right?
Right.
There's no such thing as a parenting emergency. I have to make sure you get the right message across. I have to make sure that our values are being upheld. Yes, those are true. Those are not emergencies. You can
Right.
always come back and deal with that later, and you will
Yep.
do it much better. Right? When I say emergency, I mean someone has got their hand out and is about to strike, or if there's a
Yeah.
lot of blood on the floor because somebody dropped the glass on their foot or something, which I have done. So those are
I
the
was gonna say
situations.
that's not even like out of the realm of possibilities
Right?
when
No,
you
yeah,
have children.
sure, yeah. Here's my boo boo from today from trying to fix my daughter's water bottle. That was surprisingly sharp, I'll tell you. So those are the situations you got to do something right away. But otherwise, hey, let's come back to it later. You can
Yeah.
talk to your co-parent and say, you know what, when you do this, that's a problem for me. Or hey, I didn't like when this happened, or when you spoke to me like this, or anything. You can do it much better when you're a little bit calmer, a little more in
Yeah.
control. Now, something happens just before you want to go to bed. It's 11 o'clock, and you think, well, we got to discuss it so we don't get to bed angry. So what happens? Now it's 3 in the morning, and you're still angry, and now you're a wreck in the morning to boot. If
Mhm.
you're angry, when you're ramped up, you can't do it well. Nobody can.
Right.
I can't. Right? And I've been teaching this for years. You take a
Yes.
break. You know what? What's the worst thing that'll happen? You face the opposite direction of the bed, and everybody's grumbling, and it's awkward because we all know we're angry at each other. Okay, that is very manageable. That does not do
Yes.
a lot of damage to a relationship. What does
Right.
damage to a relationship is the part where you get at like 1:23 in the morning when things flip to the nasty name calling. That's when it's a problem. That
Oh,
does a
yeah.
lot of damage. And again, the same thing with kids, of course, right? Calling your kids names, bad idea. I have definitely wanted to do that, right?
Sure.
I totally understand the instinct to smack your kids. I got 4 of them. I know what it's like.
Oh my gosh. That's a
Yeah,
lot of kids.
it's a lot of kids, and it's just not helpful to hit them.
No. I
So you
and
gotta calm
thank
down.
you.
People make this mistake that like, well, if I don't say it now, then it's as if I'm okay with it. Well, no, you can come back and say, come back the next day. When you said that, that's not acceptable to me. The
Yeah.
message gets across loud and clear. In fact, it is much clearer when the message is delivered like that than when you scream like a crazy person. Right?
Mm,
Sometimes people come to you when they're calmer and they say, you are a jerk, right? Very calmly, or like, you messed that up. That, we psychologists people talk about I statements all the time, right? Just means when you need to talk about a problem, you're much better off talking about how it impacted you,
right.
right? If I say, you know what, if you talk to your kid, when you went around screaming around the house like that, it was really hard for me. I
Mhm.
felt very angry. You're doing a lot better than if you say you are immature, you are selfish. Nobody goes, you know what? You're right, I am. Like that's not how people work. People immediately get defensive, and
Sure.
anyone who's listening knows that's true because if they get called some kind of name, they get defensive. We all do that. If someone tells you what you have done wrong and why you are bad, you will become defensive. And
Mhm.
defensiveness does not equal good communication. In terms of the communication styles, passive, aggressive, assertive,
Ooh.
right? So passive means where you let somebody else trample over your boundaries, and aggressive means where you trample over theirs. But assertive means, like you were saying, you hold your own boundaries and you do not trample somebody else's. I respect your
Mhm.
boundaries, but I respect my boundaries. And being able to communicate that way is really fundamental to the whole process I describe, which I call empathic dialogue, where
Oh,
we are able to
love that.
dialogue. It's where we dialogue with each other in an empathic way, obviously. It's that in terms of not a particularly creative name, but it gets the point across. That doesn't mean that you're going to talk to everybody about every issue,
Yeah.
but anybody who comes your way who disagrees with you, even strongly, they're coming from somewhere. And for us
Mhm.
to be able to talk to them in a way that does not become a fight,
Yes.
would just change things so much. I mean, here in the US, it's everything is so politicized right now and so, partisan, and the lines are drawn, and it's a shame. Like we all share many values. I mean, I think you and I are politically quite different, and yet we both agree that freedom is important and autonomy is important and connection and respect and nonviolence and things like that. We believe many of the same values. Okay, so we can discuss together. Like we could understand how our similar values play out in different ways. We
Right.
could offer empathy to the other person. I'm sure we would come out disagreeing strongly on many things, and that's okay.
Sure.
Like that's the way the world is designed. People are different. People will have different opinions. We could do this with a lot less hatred and anger than there is out there. Oh. And yet we could still dialogue about those values afterwards. Not, a public space is probably not the way to do it, but we could certainly have a dialogue about whatever comes up in a respectful way. And again, when something comes up, that's not the time necessarily. It's not an emergency. And doing it in a way that, talks about my experience versus you're a big fat jerk. And, being empathic towards the other person. There's a lot of these things, again, I talk about it in the context of marriage, but I think many of these principles apply universally. And I think it would be so helpful for people in so many ways. And again, really, I mean, it starts in the home, right? I mean, it's true that
Yeah.
this applies everywhere, but who do you talk to more, and who do you need to be closer to than the person you're trying to build a life with? Parenting is a great example of something that is not an emergency. It's very important, but rarely is there an emergency, and we have to be ready to have conversations over the course of a lifetime. You
Yeah.
know, people want instant solutions to a problem. It's not about that. It's more about the dialogue. Like we have got to be able to talk about our differences. I'm sure you've worked with couples where they feel very strongly different about how to raise kids. This one wants to be, very strict and rigid. This one wants to be very open and loose, and that can be challenging. Being able to talk about those differences in a way that leaves us on the same team is so critical for the marriage and for your kids, that even though there will be conflict, you can be on the same team. You can work this together and feel like we are working on the problem together, even though there's a problem between us. I am mad at you, yet we are working on it together. Taking a break is so critical. People find this difficult sometimes, but it's so important. I do this myself. Just recently, I got irritated with my wife, and I said to myself, okay, time to shut up. And I held on to it for like 2 or 3 days, not like sitting there stewing. I just put it on the
Right.
side, and I checked in with myself, and I said, nope, not ready to discuss this yet. Right. And then when I said, I could talk about this and not lose my cool. Great. Now it's time. And it took us a couple days to get there, and that's okay. I'm not a
Yes.
fan of rug sweeping, right? You don't sweep under the rug. Um, we talked about the going to bed angry thing. I find that for most of us, when you wake up in the morning, about half the things that bothered you last night just aren't a big deal anymore. And not in the sense of like, okay, I can't talk about this, but just like, I was tired. It's not a big deal. And it goes away. So that's great. But then there's the other 50% that you do need to talk about. You have to explain, this hurt me, or I'm angry about this, or like I'm worried when you said this that it means that. Great.
Mhm.
So now, if you are still very irritated, and again, it took me a couple days to get to the point where I could bring up this topic in my head and not be irritated again.
Yeah.
So, okay, you know what? I'm still irritated. We'll put it back down. I'll just, it's there. I'm not forgetting about it. You can write it down somewhere so you remember to talk about it. It doesn't have to go away. You don't say to yourself, okay, well, I can't talk about this. I can talk about this. I got to wait until I'm ready. And then you bring
Yes.
it back out and you can talk about it again. The book lays out a whole process for being able to discuss difficult issues in a way that does not escalate. And when emotions run high, you take a break again and you put it aside for a little time,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And you can keep interacting with each other. There's no rule that says if I'm angry at you, I can't be nice to you. Right. We think sometimes like I have to show you that I'm mad. I'm not going to be nice to you because of what you said to me. Like it's not really the way it works, right? If it's always going to be tit for tat, like there's going to be a lot of back and forth ping pong in this relationship. Okay, you hurt my feelings. I didn't like it. I'm not ready to talk about that. I'll put it aside. Let's go bowling with the family, and we'll still have a good time, right?
Yeah.
No, no, it's not going to come across like, oh, everything's forgiven. I work with a lot of people where there's been infidelity, and it's very hard for the
Ugh,
person who was cheated
brutal.
on to be nice about, I mean, look, there's a lot of rebuilding that has to be done, but they worry that if I'm nice to him or to her, that they'll think that everything's okay. They're
Yeah.
not thinking. Believe, like, no, we're not giving that message. It's okay to be mad and to be hurt and to still be
Yes.
nice and say, you know what? Hey, would you like eggs for breakfast? We're full of contradicting emotions, right? I love my
Always.
wife when I'm mad at her, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be one or the other. I can be irritated with you, I can be worried about something you said, and I can still love you, and I can express both. I
Yeah.
love you, and I don't like the way this happened. And that's
Yeah.
also great for kids. Like, hey, I really love you, but I'm disappointed in the way that you did this.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I think you're a great kid. I love the way you do this and that and the other, but you did this and this and this, and that's really not acceptable in our family. So it's this
Yes.
message of love and firmness. Again, it's assertive communication. This is my boundary. I'm not going to trample yours by calling you names or screaming or hitting, but I will hold my own boundaries. When we sit down to discuss an issue, it's really important to figure out what the issue is before trying to solve it. You can't solve a problem you don't understand.
Love
And it
that.
sounds pretty obvious, but we do it all the time. Right? So, you come in and your husband left the empty jug of milk in the fridge. Right? So, I don't like that you let the jug. Okay, and then, so he goes out and he gets another jug of milk and he puts it in the fridge and now it's better, right? No, it's not
No.
better because the problem is not that you were out of milk. That's part of the problem. But the other problem is you're annoyed at him. He never listens to you, or he doesn't take care of the things you need in here, in the house, or you asked him and he forgot and he never. All these things that are going on inside your head that
Yep.
need to come out, or we're not going to solve the problem.
Yep.
And if we run right to the resolution, then we're short circuiting the process, and I'm still going to have stuff that I'm mad at you about. So to be able to
Yes.
stop, I do this all the time with my wife. When something's going on, I say, "Hey, you know what? Let's talk about our feelings, and then we'll get to the resolution." I know it's really kitschy to talk about our feelings. You can use whatever language you want, but that's what's going on. Something came up with one of our kids, and we're both frustrated. Okay, before we decide how we're going to handle this, let's talk about how we feel about it. I'm really worried about her future because of this, that, and the other. Like, I'm more than I'm worried. I'm really angry that she would think to do whatever it is. We have to get that all out so that we know what is on our plate. And then once we have everything on the plate together, then we can look at it and say, you know what, here might be some good options. But for everyone out there listening who has ever tried to solve a problem in their family and found that it didn't pan out, you know what I'm talking about, right? You
Yes.
come back to the same problem because you haven't dealt with what's actually the problem.
Yep.
Being able to divide it into two. Let's just talk about, we're not going to solve the problem right now. I tell this with myself, my wife, my clients. We're going to talk about this, and we are not going to end this conversation with a solution. Afterwards, maybe right
How
afterwards,
freeing is that? That is
there,
so freeing.
right. We
I
do not
don't
have
have to
to.
solve this problem right now.
Right. It feels important to do so. And we may get to the resolution conversation right afterwards, but until we get everything out about how we feel, the solution is very difficult to come by. But once you know what you're dealing with, the solution is much easier to come by. Solutions often are pretty easy to find once you know what the issues are. Like, oh, you're worried about this. Oh, I didn't even realize that. That happens all the time. I don't know what's in your head until you tell me what's going on. I don't know what's really bothering you here. I think I have an idea. I know part of it, but there's so much more. We're so complex as human beings. There's so
Yes.
much in there. There may be a problem and it may need a solution, but you don't have to do it now. In fact, you can't do it now, right? I mean, in no other realm of life do we assume, okay, you walk into your work and like, we got to figure out the marketing plan or whatever it is. Like, you don't walk out of there like, okay, here's it is. Like, okay, let's talk about, here's the issues, here's the numbers, here, there's the whole discussion first.
Right.
You don't just walk out in one day with a plan for the whole business. You do research and all these other things. You need to know the information. What is the problem before I can solve it? Many people are competent, rational, nice people, and we all turn into not that when we are emotionally ramped up. So, you don't have to make up before you go to bed. You don't have to solve the problem right now, right? If you're in a conversation that's going badly, take a break. Take a break is my number one tip that people need. Nothing else we talk about is going to help. You can have all the greatest communication techniques in the world, but Mike Tyson said it like this: everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? So, right. Okay. So,
Yes.
you've got a good plan for communication, but then you get triggered by something and
Yeah.
it's all out the window. Take a
Yep.
break. It'll make things better.